Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Gurudeva 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 Jaya Gurudeva. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Vaishnav Guru Varga Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Caitanya Caritamrita Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्री वसति गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Goratushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, welcome again to Caitanya Caritamrita class. We are continuing today from yesterday, again in the less than opulent locale that I'm currently in, but we'll only be here for the remainder of this week and then next week as well. So, we are continuing our discussion of the Rai Ramananda Samvad, as we have been for a while now, and we've been going into the discussion to the conclusive and concluding remarks of the answer to the first section of the second question. The second question is, again, composed of what? The first question was asking, what is the supreme absolute goal of life? Then we know we went through all the levels. The second question is asking about the tattva, the conclusive truth regarding four separate but related topics. The first one, and the one that we're discussing right now, is Krishnar Swarup. What is the Swarup of Krishna? The next one is Radhar Swarup. What is the Swarup of Srimati Radharani? The third one is Roshototto. What is the conclusive, absolute truth of rasa, of the loving exchanges, of the mellows of divine devotional love? And then the last one, Premo Tattva-rup. What is the true form of prem? Ecstatic love. So, asking this, Ramananda Rai, he is replying. Mahaprabhu has asked the question, and Ramananda Rai, he is responding. And in his response, as we've discussed, he begins with an elaboration of the opulence. He speaks Ishvara Paramaha Krishnaha Satchidananda Vigraha Nadiradir Govindaha Sarva Karana Karanam. Very much speaking of tattva, the philosophy, the opulence, the sovereignty. Sovereignty is a very popular idea, especially among Christians, especially Christians in the Reformed tradition following John Calvin and other Reformed thinkers. They'll get upset if you say they're just following John Calvin, but he is probably the most influential thinker in their line. There's other thinkers like, well, it depends. B.B. Warfield as a modern thinker, then of course John Knox, to a lesser degree Zwingli. But anyways, that's not in the consideration of Caitanya Caritamrita. But often churches in this line, especially the Baptist version, there are two main lineages, if you will, within the Reformed tradition. There's the Pedo-Baptists and there's the Credo-Baptists. And among the Credo-Baptists, they will often name their church Sovereign. This is Sovereign Church. Why? Because God is sovereign over everything. God's power as King is most fully expressed in His sovereignty. They will say that this specific type of Christianity, they'll say, other Christians have got it wrong. They stress God's love too much. Yes, God is love, but He's also many other things. So we are bringing an emphasis to the very important quality of sovereignty. Because how can God be king? How can God be loved as king if He is not loved as the sovereign God who rules over all existence, without whose will not even a blade of grass can move? And they are not wrong, but because they do not have the full revelation of truth as revealed by Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they do not realize that while this is correct in relation to the Lord's relation with the material world. But in the spiritual realm, Krishna exists independent of His sovereignty. He exists sovereign over His sovereignty. And it is that form which is being glorified in this section now of the answer. Rasa. Vrajendra Nandana. That sweet Krishna who is, what was that text we spent a lot of time discussing, a lot of time delving into the depths of? Akhila Rasamrita Murti. He is the form of all of these loving exchanges. This is Krishna in His highest. And then, so, what was our discussion leading us to? We were leading up to a discussion of the pramanas that were being evoked. And so, I will continue where I left off yesterday with the discussion of Srila Jayadev Goswami's text, the Gita Govinda. So yesterday we spoke of quite a few things, speaking of the genesis, if you will, the beginning of a lot of the great traditions associating Gita Govinda and therefore, by extension, Jayadev Goswami to Jagannath, which is an endorsement of his authority. And so, today we will speak a little bit more about how that legacy has continued, and then we will conclude our discussion on the Gita Govinda, and we will continue and we will speak about the next Shastra Pramana that has been quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. So, after we've had all these wonderful traditions arise of how Gita Govinda is wrapped around Jagannath at certain times of the day, and all these wonderful celebrations of Gita Govinda, history kept on going. And there was quite a few traditions that evoked and involved the Gita Govinda. One which did not keep on going were the Devadasis. We know the wife of Jayadev Goswami, originally his parents planned that she would become a Devadasi. And the Devadasis, they were there for quite a few centuries. And they would dance. They would dance in the Jagam Mohan during the breakfast period for Jagannath, which is called the Bhula Dhupa, and at the evening in the Boro Shringar Besh. So these two times they would dance and they would sing. And what they sing? They would sing Gita Govinda. This tradition continued for quite a while. It was only at 1935, there was an act passed by the British government called the Bombay Devadasi Protection Act of 1935 that outlawed the Devadasi practice. So ever since then, the Devadasi tradition has ended. However, they would sing Gita Govinda. And for those centuries that they were practicing, they were an example of how Gita Govinda was, the work of the Gita Govinda, the work of Sri Gita Govinda, composed by Jayadev Goswami, has been central to the worship of Jagannath Swami. However, even though the Devadasis, they ceased to be a thing, many traditions continue to this day. A lot of the traditions, most of them were founded by the Ganga and Surya Vamshas, the Ganga and Surya family lines. And of the ones that survived, a lot of them, the fair majority, were involving Gita Govinda. In fact, Gita Govinda became such a prominent part of the worship of Jagannath that there is a Pandit, and his whole job is revolving around the recitation of the Gita Govinda. He's called the Gita Govinda Sevak Pandit, and he sings Gita Govinda in the morning during the Chandan Lagi. The Chandan Lagi is when the deities, they're decorated with sandalwood. They're decorated with Chandan. We can piece that together. And so he has to actually pass a test to show that he has proficiency, he has ability. It's not just the role they give to the family idiot or something. This is a proper, paka, intense role. To be the Gita Govinda Sevak Pandit. And whenever any new Sevak is initiated into the Seva, there is a tradition that involves. We were speaking about how there's that special sari cloth which is wrapped around Jagannath with Gita Govinda written on it. The Gajapati Maharaj, the king, he will take that prasad, the remnant, and for a new sevak, somebody who is looking to be inducted into the service of Jagannath Swami, the king, he will take that cloth and he will wrap it around their head and he will tie it around their head. And that will signify this new sevak, he is now being engaged, he is now a sevak. Now he is qualified to be a sevak of Jagannath. There is some purport to this, because this is really associating Jagannath Seva with the Gita Govinda. This is an essential part. This is showing that if one is meant to please, what is the point of a sevak? What is the point of seva? Seva is service with the attitude to please the person you are serving. So what is pleasing to Jagannath? This is what is being reflected here. The Gita Govinda is very pleasing to Jagannath Swami, and therefore it is being used to show. This sets the tone. When one is initiated or one is inducted into something, the tone is set. How must your service look like? What must your service be? All of these things. And so, by the tying around like this is establishing. Now we can get some idea. What is the mood of Jagannath? And this cloth, actually, originally it was made in Kenduli, near the Prachi river. This is where it was originally made. This is the first one. We were speaking the past time of this Krishna Das, who appeared. Krishna Dev, who appeared, who was actually Jagannath himself. But in the current day, now it is being made in the village called Nuapattu, in the Tigiriya block of Cuttack. So in Cuttack now it is being made. And this cloth also now, on its own, has a lot of significance. Even not just the Gita Govinda, but the cloth which is used to contain the Gita Govinda when it is presented to Jagannath. This as well is having so much value, so much importance. We know there's the 4 darus which are collected. We know Jagannath, he's carved again from these trees. There's a long process of how the Pandit, he goes and he prays to Durga Ma, and she appears and tells him this is where you should go, and like this there is the whole process. But the 4, part of the process is that these 4, they are all wrapped in cloth which is having Gita Govinda written on it. So we find here even the birth of Jagannath, the appearance of Jagannath in new form, still the same eternal form, but in new form, even that is born from Gita Govinda. Because Krishna, in many ways, he is born from devotion. Krishna is the source of Bhakti Devi, but Bhakti Devi in many ways is also the source of Krishna. How this really works is transcendental. It was maybe a mystery, so I won't try to explain it too much. But we see from here hints of that. This is the great value. Because Gita Govinda is so much embodying what the form of devotion is. So then like this has happened. But not just this cloth is used to decorate Jagannath with Gita Govinda. We were speaking about the Bodo Shringar Vesh, Bodo Shringar Vesh, which is the nighttime dress of Jagannath, which is when the Devadasis, they would sing Gita Govinda. Nowadays is not sung so often. Instead, the disciples of Tulsidas, they sing Gita Govinda at night. Still, throughout the day, Gita Govinda is being recited. But now some works of Tulsidas also are sung at the nighttime, where the Shringar Besh is coming from. And this Shringar Besh, actually, it itself, it's decorated with malas. There is malas which are made by one Mataji named Nalini Patanaik. She's a very sweet devotee, and she's always writing the Gita Govinda on tulsi leaves, and then making these garlands out of tulsi leaves with Gita Govinda written all over. She places them on all the flowers around Jagannath, and she places one on Jagannath's heart and sticks it on with sandalwood paste, like this, very sweetly done. So she does this, and this is another way that Jagannath, he is constantly absorbed in the Gita Govinda. So then, now we can know for sure that Jayadev Goswami, he is a great devotee, and this text, the Gita Govinda, it is Shastra. Why is it Shastra? Because it has been spoken by such a great devotee as Jayadev Goswami, and because the text has been accepted as authoritative by Jagannath himself. This is the esteemed value, the esteemed position of the Gita Govinda. So when the Gita Govinda is quoted, we should not think, hey, why is this book being quoted? What is the value of such a book? We should know that even if it is not a Purana, even if it is not an Upanishad, still it can be Shastra, because it has come from the lotus mouth of the great devotee. And in fact, Jayadev Goswami, he plays a very special role even among all the other great devotee poets. He is often described as Adi Pada Karta. He is the first of the devotee poets. He is the original. We know Adi Lila, Adi, first. He is the original of the great poets who are describing the beauty of Krishna. One of the real greats. And because of this, practically the whole genre of all of the kavya, all of the poetry that arose, all of the poetry that arose, especially glorifying Krishna after Jayadev Goswami, is essentially built upon the structure, the framework that Gita Govinda has provided. Gita Govinda, Jayadev Goswami, he has established the genre. A whole genre has been established by this amazing text. And so, lots of texts straight up just took direct inspiration. It's estimated around 152 poems in the style of directly. In the style of Gita Govinda is countless, but directly influenced by Gita Govinda's structure or directly referencing it, 152 long poems in between the 14th and 19th centuries. So only 500 years, not even all of history after the Gita Govinda. 152 texts were made in this style. So this is the value. This is the impact. This is how much the devotees relished it. Again, Gita Govinda, endorsed by the great authority of the great Vaishnavas. And because of this, there's around 1,500 manuscripts today of texts, all taking inspiration or based upon the Gita Govinda. And in fact, texts that we often like to quote. The most of the books, if not all the books that Mahaprabhu was relishing in the Gambhira, were all based upon Gita Govinda. The Jagannath Vallabha Nataka by Rai Ramananda himself. Rai Ramananda, he writes books. And Rai Ramananda has written one book called the Jagannath Vallabha Nataka. And this book itself is directly inspired and directly based upon Sri Gita Govinda. So this text is very valuable, very influential. And we can see here the widespread adoption of it as a standard and as a Shastra. And the final point to reinforce the Gita Govinda is Shastra is that there have been so many commentaries written upon it from all sorts of sampradayas, all sorts of bona fide sampradayas. Even some people who are maybe not as legitimate, like Mirabai, even they have composed many commentaries, but also within the very legitimate and bona fide lines. In the line of Vallabhacharya, there have been commentaries written. In our own Gauriya Vaishnav Sampradaya, commentaries have been written. Various legitimate acharyas have commented upon this text. And therefore, Gita Govinda is a valid Shastra. There is a lot of evidence for it. There's a lot of support for it. It is a very powerful text. It's a very influential text. And so it is a text that we would do well to respect and to adopt. So now, continuing our conversation and delving deeper into the further pramanas, there is next, Rai Ramananda, what does he say? He says, Lokhi kantadi obotarer hore mon, Lokhi adi nari goner kore akorshon. He also attracts Narayan, who is the incarnation of Sankarshan and the husband of the goddess Fortune. He attracts not only Narayan, but also all women, headed by the goddess of Fortune, the consort of Narayan. And then he quotes a text from the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. And we will speak a little bit about the pastime that surrounded this text. This text, it comes not in the rasic sections of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, but instead in the Dwarka pastimes. So there's a bit of opulence involved in them. Krishna is allowed to be God, so to speak. And it begins after there's a discussion who is more merciful, Shiva or Vishnu, these sort of things. But anyways, then after this conversation is had by the sages, Shukadev Goswami, he recites a story about a Brahmin in Dwarka whose wife gave birth to a son. But as soon as the son touched the ground, he died. He passed away. And the Brahmin, he was very, very upset. Obviously, it was his son. He was so excited, so happy. And he took the corpse and he placed it at the door of Maharaj Ugrasena's court. And he said, agitated and lamenting miserably, completely upset, completely distraught, he spoke very heavily. And he said that there is an enemy of the Brahmins who is duplicitous and greedy. And he is an unqualified ruler who is addicted to sense pleasure. This is our king. And he has caused my son's death by some discrepancies in the execution of his duties. Because the thing is, in Vedic times, we understand that the king or the ruler is responsible for the well-being directly. In fact, in Hari Bhakti Vilas this is quoted. This is why sometimes it's said, the Guru takes the karma of the disciples. It is not like how the Christians will think. The Christians will think the karma, the disciple takes their karma and he throws it onto the Guru. And then the Guru is suffering like this. Actually, the Guru destroys the disciples' karma by giving them spiritual knowledge, which elevates them beyond the platform of fruitive work and all these sort of things. So the Guru destroys karma like this. However, the Guru also does take some sort of weight on his shoulders. It's not just that it's all easy going. And how does he do it? He does it by taking responsibility for the disciple. And therefore, the disciple's misbehavior is to a degree an extension of the spiritual master's responsibility. The spiritual master has a similar relationship to his disciple that the king does of his subjects. So, if something bad is happening, the reverse is also true. It could be said by citizens that, well, bad things are happening. Why? Because the well-being of the kingdom is the responsibility of the king. Srila Prabhupada once, he was being told a newspaper story. I think it was about Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi, she was going somewhere, and people were very upset with her, and they were like throwing rocks at her. And when Srila Prabhupada heard about this, he said, that is good. And Srila Prabhupada's disciples were confused, and they're saying, how could that be good? That's the leader of India. It is not good that people are so upset that they are trying to attack her. And Srila Prabhupada said, it is good because it shows that people still have some spiritual idea. They still feel that the king, the ruler, is responsible for their problems. Because they were throwing the stones because of drought. A person might say, how absurd is this? How could the ruler be responsible for the drought? Is because, in the Vedic understanding, the well-being of the kingdom, how the demigods relate to the kingdom, is all based on the execution of religious principles by the ruler. Which is why we are being hit by so many terrible things now. Bushfires, corona, all of these things are happening because our rulers are allowing cows to be killed. Forget about not executing religious principles properly. They're not executing them at all. So, what to do then? Just recently, it turns out, one of the premiers of New South Wales, she had an affair. What? She was cheating on her husband. Like this. Also, we see, even forgetting that, how many of the rulers, all of them practically, are eating beef. They are killing cows. They're pushing for policies to allow beef farming to become stronger and stronger. Supporting the slaughter of cows. Actually, it would be a disgrace if they didn't ban it. By allowing it, it is a disgrace. But by supporting it, no wonder we are in such a bad condition. So anyway, the Brahmin was not wrong to blame the king, in a sense, because he's saying the king, if bad things are happening, this is the misbehavior of the king. And so he says a very important teaching then. He says, citizens serving such a wicked king, who takes pleasure in violence and cannot control his senses, are doomed to suffer poverty and constant misery. And we see this. If we look at the communist countries, what terrible things happened to them. Because their rulers were tyrants, killing anyone who disagreed with them. And not controlling their senses at all. They were using their monopolized government in order to bring themselves apparent happiness, to bring themselves sense gratification. The famous critique of the communists, Animal Farm, by George Orwell, he says that they thought the leaders, everyone's equal, but we are more equal than others. But some are more equal than others. So we see in this example, and then what happened? The worst amounts of deaths in any country in history were all under communist rule. So, like this, we see, is the natural conclusion of bad leaders. And so the Brahmin, he left, upset, but he went back. And then his wife, she became pregnant with a second child, and the Brahmin was very happy. Finally, I will have a son. And then what happened? The moment his son touched the ground, he passed away as well. And so the Brahmin, he went to the king's door and he left the son and he sang the same thing. Who is this enemy of the Brahmins? Who is this duplicitous, envious king? But then his wife became pregnant a third time. And on the third time, the exact same thing happened. He touched the ground and he passed away. And the same thing happened. The Brahmin, he brought the body of the child and presented it to the king's door. And this happened again and again and again, until the 9th child. And on the occasion of the 9th child's death, Arjuna heard the Brahmin lamenting and crying and being so angry and frustrated. And Arjuna addressed the Brahmin and he said, What is the matter? Dear Brahmin, what is wrong? Isn't there at least some lowly member of the royal order who can at least stand before your house with a bow in his hand? These Kshatriyas are behaving as if they were Brahmins, idly engaged in fire sacrifices. So, Arjuna, he is saying, this is not proper. Who do these... Actually, it's funny that the same Arjuna who on the battlefield at Bhagavad Gita, he learned his lesson. On the battlefield, he said, I want to become like a Brahmin. I want to go take sannyas. And Krishna said, hey, what is this foolishness that has overcome you? So that same Krishna, that same Arjuna, he's saying, who are these Kshatriyas? They think they're Brahmins, just sitting down, doing yagyas. And so he said, the rulers of the kingdoms in which the Brahmins lament over lost wealth, wives and children, are merely impostors, playing the roles of kings, just to earn their livelihood. Heavy, but true. They are not a real ruler if they are not properly supplying for the Brahmins. And so Arjuna then, he makes a vow, a vow that very much follows his Kshatriya tendencies. And he says, I will protect the progeny of you and your wife who are in such distress. And if I fail to keep this promise, I will enter fire to atone for my sin. I will give up my life if I'm not able to rescue your sons. Why would he say, I will give up my life? Not to reassure the Brahmin, but in order to preserve his dignity. Arjuna would rather die than not be able to fulfill his promise. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita, Sambhavitasya chakirtir maranad atirichyate. For a respected person, dishonor is worse than death. So Arjuna, he vows with this intensity, I will die if it means I could not keep my word. And the Brahmin, he then nicely, he speaks a rather poetic point. And he says, neither Sankarshan, Vasudev, Pradyumna, the best of bowmen, nor the unequaled warrior Aniruddha could save my sons. These are the Chaturvyuha. We will discuss them in more depth in the teachings to Sanatana Goswami. Then why do you naively attempt a feat that the almighty lords of the universe could not perform? We cannot take you seriously. And Arjuna, he said, Naham sankarshano brahman, na Krishna karshinir evacha, ahamva arjuno nama, gandivam yasya vaidhanuhu. I am neither Lord Sankarshan, O Brahmin, nor Lord Krishna, nor Krishna's son. Instead, I am Arjun, wielder of the Gandiva bow. Mavam mamstha mama brahman viryam trayambaka toshanam mrityum vichitya pradhane aneshyete praja prabho. Do not minimize my ability, which was good enough to satisfy Lord Shiva, O Brahmin. I will bring back your sons, dear master, even if I have to defeat death himself in battle. And so the Brahmin, hearing these words, he thought, oh, well, he seems pretty adamant and he seems pretty confident. So the Brahmin was satisfied. He thought, well, if anyone then can save my sons, it is Arjuna. So he went home. He went home. And so when the wife was about to give birth, Arjuna went into great anxiety. The Brahmin went into great anxiety. And he told Arjuna, please protect my child. You gave me all of these words. Now my child is about to be born. Please, please, please protect him. And so then Arjuna, he strung his bow Gandiva after touching pure water, offering obeisances to Maheshwara, and chanting the mantras for all of his celestial weapons. See, this Brahmin actually he had caused some disrespect to Krishna. The reason why we will explain another time. I would go into details, but I don't want to explain. If you go into every related pastime, you you end up speaking the whole Bhagavatam. So he had actually offended Krishna, which is why Arjuna, we might wonder, Arjuna is a devotee of Krishna. What's he doing honoring Maheshwar? But because of this, Arjuna offered his obeisances to Maheshwar, to Shiva, which is allowed, which is fine. Because it was actually Shiva who taught Arjuna how to use the mantras of all of these celestial Pashupata weapons. So Arjuna then, he shot all of his arrows attached to various missiles, and he created a fence around the house where the birth was taking place. He created a cage of arrows covering the house upwards, downwards, and sideways. In every direction, the house was protected. And so then, the baby was born, protected in all directions. But after he had been crying for a short time, when babies cry, he suddenly vanished into the sky. The Brahmin then chastised Arjuna, and he said, "Hey, Are, I was such a fool to put my faith in the bragging of a eunuch. There is no greater insult to a Brahmin to call him a eunuch. Just some celibate eunuch, what are you? You're no Kshatriya." This is what the Brahmin meant. And he chastised heavily like this Arjuna. And he says, "Na pradyumno na niruddho na ramo na chakeshavaha yasya sheku paritratum konyastad aviteshvaraha." Neither Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Rama, nor Keshava can save a person. And when this is true, who else can possibly protect him? Dhigarjunam vrishavadam dhigatma shlaghino dhanuhu daivo pasrishtam yo maudhyad anishanti dhurmatihi. To hell with Arjuna, that liar. To hell with that bragging braggart's bow. He is so foolish that he has deluded himself into thinking he can bring back a person whom destiny, inevitable time, has already taken away. And so, insult after insult after insult, the Brahmin, he was insulting Arjuna. And so, while this is happening, Arjuna, he used a mystic incantation to go to Samyamani, where Yamaraj is living. And meeting Yamaraj, Arjuna, he went around in Yamaraj's lair, he saw Yamaraj is here, Yamadutas are here. But where are the Brahmin's children? So after that, Arjuna, he went to the city of Indra. No Brahmin's children. To the city of Agnidev. No Brahmin's children. To the city of Nirriti. No children there. To the city of Soma. No children there. To the city of Vayu. No children there. And to the city of Varuna. No children there. And with all of his weapons ready, he then went through all the domains of the universe. Not just the peaceful heavenly planets, but also to the hellish planets. The bottom of the hell to the roof of heaven. But nowhere could he find the Brahmin sons. And so he thought, well, now I must live up to my word. And so he said, now I will enter into the sacred fire. I have not kept my word, and I will happily die, if it means to avoid the shame of not being able to keep my word. And as he was just about to enter the fire, Krishna stopped him. And what did Krishna do? He spoke to him. And so, he spoke some words. But one may quickly ask, oh, you've missed a place. You've missed Shiva Lok. The reason why Arjuna didn't go there is because, as we established, Shiva was his guru. He taught him the military ways. So what did Krishna say? Krishna said, Darshaye dvija sununste ma vagyatmanam atmana ye te nah kirtim vimalam manushya yishyanti. I will show you the Brahmin sons. Do not be so revolted with yourself. Do not despise yourself like this. I will show you where they are. These same men who are criticizing us, these Brahmin who is blaspheming you, soon he will sing of your glories. And having spoken to Arjuna thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he took Arjuna into his chariot, and then he brought him towards the west. In the western direction he went off with his chariot. And so the Lord's chariot, it went through all of the 7 islands of the material the middle universe. We know there's all the islands and there's all the different oceans that separate them. And as you go along the islands, you go through all the different, you go through the Milk Ocean, you go through all these other oceans. And each ocean is twice as, each ocean and island is twice as big as the one that came before it. Like rings. It's like donut inside a donut inside a donut inside a donut. Like this. But then, at one point, the sun's rays, it spreads all around all of the islands. But the sun rays are blocked by this giant mountain range that surrounds it. This is all described in 5th canto of Bhagavatam if you read. And this boundary is called Loka Loka. It is a mountain range which blocks the rays of the sun. So once one goes past Loka Loka, there is no sunlight. So when they went through, there was total darkness. Nothing could be seen. But in the darkness of this was very confusing. It was very, very confusing to who? Maybe not to Krishna, he's in the chariot. Maybe not to Arjuna, he's also in the chariot. But to Shaibya, Sugriva, Meghapushpa, and Balahaka, the horses of Krishna's chariot. They all didn't know where to go. And so then Krishna, completely covered in darkness, seeing his poor confused horses, he sent the Sudarshan Chakra before the chariot. And that Sudarshan, they only needed one sun in order to illuminate that material universe before Lokaloka mountain. But in the Sudarshan Chakra, what did they get? They got thousands of suns. Now we shouldn't think that the horses were actually bewildered. They are eternal associates from Vaikuntha. They were merely playing pastimes. In the same way that Krishna plays a pastime and appears to be like a human, in the same way the horses, they manifest their pastime, pretending to be mundane horses, even though they are eternally liberated devotees. And so the Sudarshan Chakra, it penetrated through the darkness. Normally it cuts through the heads of demons, but now it is cutting through the black darkness. And moving at the speed of mind, it cut through the fearsome oblivion of darkness that is composed of primeval matter. As an arrow that would be shot from Lord Ramchandra's bow cuts through his enemy's army. Following the Sudarshan Chakra, the chariot went beyond the darkness, and now they exited the material world. Now they entered into the ocean of the Brahma Jyoti. And seeing this effulgent, impersonal glory of the Supreme Lord, seeing this personal effulgence, Arjuna's eyes began to hurt. He felt pain. So he shut his eyes. How can I look at this? This is too intense. But after doing this, because what is this glow? This is nothing else in the glow. The Brahma Jyoti is nothing else in the glow of Krishna's skin. So it is a very intense thing to witness. However, after entering into that region, they entered a body of water which is filled with huge waves which are being churned by a mighty wind. And within that ocean, Arjuna saw something very, very beautiful, more radiant and majestic than anything he had ever seen before in his life. And this beautiful thing, its beauty was enhanced by thousands of ornamental pillars, which are covered in brilliant, beautiful gems. And what was that beautiful thing? What was that a beautiful thing? It was an amazing palace. All of the palace's pillars were filled with beautiful gems. And what was the beautiful, majestic thing in the palace? Ananta Shesh. The awe-inspiring, Aishvarya-filled Anantashesh, who shone brilliantly, with radiance that was pouring out from the gems on his thousands of hoods, and that were reflected from twice as many fearsome eyes. Of course, because there's a gem on each one of the heads, and there's 2 eyes on each head, so it makes sense. For as many gems that there are twice as many eyes. So beautiful these gems were glowing. He resembled Mount Kailash, and his neck and tongues were a dark, dark blue. And so then, we came close. We are coming close to the text. But we hear then, now, a beautiful description. I was going to say the Sanskrit, but it'll take too long. But Arjuna then saw that omnipresent, that omnipotent, that Ishvara Parama, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, who is actually not Ishvara Parama in the sense that he is not the source of all the incarnations. He is an expansion of Balaram. And he was sitting in his beauty on Anantashesh, on the serpent bed of Anantashesh. And with his Sham Sundar complexion, the color of the dense rain cloud, he wore his beautiful yellow dhoti, his face being charming and wonderful, his broad eyes so attractive, and his 8 long handsome arms capturing the heart. He had these profuse, long, beautiful locks of hair that were bathed on all sides in the resplendent glow from the clusters of all of the jewels that were decorating his crowns and earrings. He wore the Kaustubha gem, the mark of Srivatsa, and a garland of forest flowers. And these first 2 are the significant signs that this person that you are witnessing is none other than Supreme Personality of Godhead. What are those 2? They're the Kaustubha gem and the mark of Srivatsa, the golden hair. Serving the topmost of all lords were his personal attendants, headed by Sunanda and Nanda, his chakra and other weapons in their personified forms, his consort potencies, Pushti, Shri, Kirti, and Aja, and all his various mystic powers. So, we know there are all of these things. And we will wonder, well, what do you mean his consort potencies? Normally we hear of Shri, we hear of Lakshmi, we hear of Radharani. Who are these potencies? Prabhupada, he actually comments that these potencies, they're all potencies for different elements which tie in specifically to Mahavishnu's purpose. Pushti is the energy, the Shakti for nourishment. Shri, the Shakti, the potency for beauty. Kirti, the Shakti, the energy for reputation. And Aja, the energy in order to engage in the Sarga, the primary direct creation. So all of these potencies, they're directly related to the material world, which is why Mahavishnu, again, Mahavishnu is the Vishnu Tattva relating to this material world. Again, to reiterate that point. And all of these energies, they are the means by which Mahavishnu, he empowers Brahma, Shiva, and Indra, Chandra, Varuna, and Surya. All these other beings are empowered, specifically and most normally with these Shaktis. And then what happened? Vavanda Atmanam Manantam Achyutto Jishnushchatad Darshana Jata Sadvasaha Tavaha Bhuma Parameshtinam Prabhur Bedhanjali Sa Smitam Urjaya Gira. Lord Krishna, he offered homage unto himself in this boundless form. And Arjuna, astonished at the sight of Lord Mahavishnu, bowed down as well. Then, as the 2 of them stood before him and with joined palms, the Almighty Mahavishnu, Supreme Master of all rulers of the universe, smiled and spoke to them in a full voice, which was filled with solemn and authority. So, we understand. How can we understand Krishna is paying obeisance to himself? We understand this in the same way that Krishna pays obeisance to Govardhan Hill. In order for pastimes, the Lord, what will he do? He will pay homage to himself. The Lord is Ananta. And so he is more than able to pay homage to one of his other infinite, countless manifestations. And because he is Achyuta, these are all words mentioned in the shlok, never falling from his position. In this sense, he never stops acting as a human-like form. Even though there is more awareness of Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, still he keeps his taste for being human-like. And so in order to maintain these human-like pastimes, Krishna, what does he do? He pays respects to somebody who is only his plenary portion, but nevertheless he pays respects. And so this Bhuma Purush, the supremely opulent one, who is Parameshtinam Prabhu, the Lord of multitudes of Brahmas ruling all over the universes. This form, again, very Aishvarya, very opulent. So, what does he say then, this Mahavishnu? He says now the text which is quoted. Dvijatmaja me yuvayor didrikshuna mayo panita bhuvi dharma guptaye kalavitirna vavaner bharasuran hatveha bhuyastvarayetam antime. The Mahavishnu, he says, I brought the Brahmin sons here because I wanted to see the two of you, my expansions who have descended to the earth to save the principles of religion. As soon as you finish killing the demons who burden the earth, quickly come back here to me. So he has stolen these because he wants to see them. This is the point Rai Ramananda was making. Forget about Lakshmi being attracted. Forget about all the souls being attracted. Even Mahavishnu himself is attracted to Krishna. So, like this, they were very inspired. And eventually he returned the children. I won't speak more. I don't want to go into too much detail after I quote the shlok. But Mahavishnu, he gave them the sons and they returned, and the Brahmin, he was very happy. And Arjuna, he was completely bewildered. He thought, what an amazing thing. Not realizing that he is friends with something so much more amazing. So this is the text, this is the context which was spoken, and it's making the point. This is how all-attractive Krishna is. This is how sweet his pastimes are, that even Mahavishnu is instantly drawn towards them. Krishna is all-attractive in every sense of the term. He is not just all-attractive to some forms. He is not just all-attractive to all non-Krishna or non-Vishnu forms. Krishna is all-attractive to all reality. And this is shown, again, in this text here. So, upon that note, we will conclude for today, and then tomorrow we will speak on the last pramana, which comes from the Kaliya pastime. And this shlok is coming from is coming from the Bhagavatam. It's coming from the pastime in which Krishna, he dances on Kaliya's head. So we will read of this text, and we will read of this pastime tomorrow when we conclude our discussion on these three pramanas, and then we will speak on one final pramana, and then we will conclude the section on Krishna's Swarup. Then we will have the week after 3 more lessons on Rai Ramananda Sambad. We'll get as far in as we can, hopefully complete it. And then after that is done, we will take a break of Caitanya Caritamrita classes during Kartik. Instead, I will be giving Damodarashtakam classes. We will go through the whole Shastra of Damodarashtakam during Kartik. But for now, we have concluded. We have understood the context of that pramana. And then next, we will hear of the context of the next pramana, speaking of Kaliya. And then we will speak one final pramana, which we have not yet mentioned. And then we will summarize the following sections, because they are very elevated. Shri Shri Rai Ramananda ki jai. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur ki jai. Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai. Shri Shri Rai Ramananda Samvad ki jai. Nittai Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasandhubhyeva cha patitanam pavinebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.